as of right now, we just received an update coming in. This is from WhatsApp, and it is from the Israel Defense Forces. It says the IDF saying an initial report. The IDF is currently conducting strikes, and this is happening on Hezbollah terror targets in the area of Beirut. So much to discuss here, so I do want to bring in a guest, friend of the show. We have David Daoud, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, focusing there on Hezbollah and Lebanon as this potential ceasefire deal could be approved here shortly. David, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you, Josh. It's always a pleasure.
So first off, David, I do want to ask, what do we know overall about the potential for this ceasefire, the deal itself? Because it does sound as though we're hearing that it's not likely this ends the war altogether. It's just a temporary situation.
Well, it depends. Are you saying, will the deal be approved by the cabinet? That's under discussion right now. It seems like Prime Minister Netanyahu has a little bit of an uphill battle convincing the more right-wing members of his coalition to agree to the deal, because this doesn't satisfy really Israel's security needs. There's also some noise from within the Likud party itself. Now, the issue is whether the 60-day trial period, so to speak, will remain permanent. To me, I look at this and I think it's very difficult to restart a war after 60 days of cessation of hostilities, especially when Israel is being led by a prime minister whose legitimacy has been battered not just by the events of October 7th, but by the year prior. How is the Israeli public going to trust this man to take them back into a war after 60 days of quiet, when Hezbollah will have taken that time to reposition themselves, to strengthen their defenses, meaning it'll be a more difficult conflict? I think it'll be very complicated to restart the war, irrespective of what's on paper.
And it does sound as though there's already concerns, without this even being approved just yet, there's already concerns that Hezbollah would violate the terms.
Well, the terms aren't strong enough to prevent Hezbollah from regenerating or violating the terms. A lot of this depends, kind of the guarantees of preventing Hezbollah's regeneration depends on the Lebanese government controlling its borders, having oversight over weapons production and importation to the country. Well, Lebanon already has that by international law, by virtue of being a sovereign state, and it's done nothing. So depending upon Lebanon again is not necessarily a solution. Now, there's this whole idea of this oversight committee that's supposed to monitor Lebanon's activities. But again, what are they supposed to do besides monitor and report? Now, there's the separate letter of assurance that the United States is supposed to be giving Israel, which is being alleged to permit Israeli freedom of action, but it really doesn't quite do that. It allows Israel to act in the case of immediate threat, but Israel's already permitted to act in the case of immediate threat, meaning a rocket's about to be fired at Israel, something of that nature. In the case of non-immediate threats, Israel has to go through this oversight committee, which includes France, which has run cover for Lebanon's inactivity in the past, and get approval before being allowed to operate. Again, that is not exactly Israeli freedom of activity.
I do want to talk, and you and I have discussed this in the past, but a lot of people do have questions or misinformation out there. So I want to clarify, what do the Lebanese people, the people there in Lebanon, civilians, how do they feel about the Hezbollah terror group there? Are they aligned with them overall, or do they disagree with them?
I think it depends. To speak of a Lebanese people in any unified fashion is very complicated. The country is broken down into sects, some with a lot of mutual aversion, and even within those sects, you have a lot of disagreement. The Maronites aren't united, the Shiites aren't united, the Druze aren't united. But what we can go off is numbers and polling. And so in May of 2022, Hezbollah won 356,000 votes in the parliamentary elections. This was the highest number of votes that any party received by 150,000, right? And this is out of a voter turnout of 1.8 million, out of a country of 4.5 million people total. That's a sizable number. In January of 2024, a Winnet poll, Washington Institute poll, found that something like 89% of Lebanese Shiites strongly support Hezbollah, 93% support Hezbollah to some degree. And an Arab Barometer poll from September found that 85% of Shiites support Hezbollah. So and let's remember that Shiites are Lebanon hasn't had a census since 1932, but as far as we know, Lebanon's Shiites are most likely Lebanon's largest demographic and definitely its largest growing demographic. So Hezbollah's support in Lebanon, even if they just have the Shiites, is not negligible.
Does the ceasefire possibly allow Israel to focus its efforts, its weaponry, things of that nature, the troops, on other areas, including Hamas there in Gaza?
In theory, it does, except there are reports that the Biden administration is sending Brett McGurk to Saudi Arabia today to potentially have a spin-off deal that also ends the fighting in Gaza. If you ask me, you've asked me throughout this conflict, what's one thing I would say what's one thing I would leave your viewers with? It's always focus on the north. That remains the case. Hezbollah is the bigger threat in a general sense, and Hamas is degraded far more than Hezbollah has been degraded. If we look at the Israeli operations in Lebanon, they've barely started to scratch the surface of Hezbollah's entrenchment in South Lebanon. So turning to Gaza, instead of Lebanon isn't necessarily a win for the Israelis when the bigger threat on Israel's border has always come from Hezbollah and remains Hezbollah.
All right. David Daoud, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, focusing there on Hezbollah and Lebanon. Always great to have you. Anything else that you want to add before I let you go?
I would just say don't be optimistic that this deal will solve the problem of Hezbollah or that it will prevent the group's regeneration. We may find ourselves, unfortunately, having this discussion in any number of years.
All right, David, as always, thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate it.